Hello, good afternoon, good afternoon. Good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for joining us. As I always say every weekend, call your friends, call your neighbors, your uncles, your aunts, and nephews and nieces and friends, everyone you love. Call them and ask them to join us because this is an important conversation that we are having. Today is the second of a 4-part series of online sessions that I'm hosting with thought leaders from here on the continent of Africa and elsewhere in the world under the theme using science of the future to shape our presence. How can we use the science of the future to shape our present? We are live on Facebook, on the UCT Facebook. So go to the UCT Facebook, you'll find us live. And you will be able to tell everyone to join us there. And of course, we try to make all the sessions that we've recorded, we make them available so that you guys and everyone that you know can join them, can watch them afterwards and learn from them. But of course, if you watch them afterwards, you do not have an opportunity to ask questions. But if you join them now, you have an opportunity to ask questions. This series aims to bridge our understanding of how science might shape our future, how we can use these predicted futures to shape the present, and how do we ensure that decisions and discussions include the voices of the African youth. Science and technology are growing at an unprecedented pace. We can't keep up. And at the same time, we want to make sure that African voices are heard. But why is it critical to include the voices of African youth in shaping the science of the future? It's important because they can start working now to mitigate both emerging and long-standing inequalities. They can do that only by bringing diverse voices and ideas to the discussion. We can ensure we get the best thinking from every part of our society and corner of the world. We need the fresh perspectives of African youth in these discussions and debates. It is a matter of intergenerational justice. Young people will inherit the future, and therefore they must be involved in shaping how science should be used to affect it. In this series, UCT is partnering with the Geneva Science and Diplomacy Anticipator, GESDA, to bring these sessions to you. There's only 4 of them. Today we are on the second. The sessions are not just open to UCT staff and students, they are open to everyone. They are more specifically for everyone, but more specifically, we're trying to get young people on the African continent to watch the sessions. They do not have to be students, and you do not have to be registered with any university, but just join us so that you can participate. And I will announce a challenge just now, as well as the prize to be won. And that prize and the challenge is not just for UCT staff and students, it's for everyone, particularly young people on the African continent. This partnership between GESDA and UCT it's an attempt to create the Youth Anticipation Initiative. And we're doing that through these critical thought-provoking conversations. And they are part of our vision as UCT to ensure that we are a future-oriented university that creates leaders who tackle social problems. African universities play a critical role in training and upskilling future leaders to be fluent in these science and diplomacy issues for addressing global challenges. You might be wondering, so what is GESDA? Well, GESDA is a Geneva-based think and do tank, and its mission is to anticipate, to accelerate, and to translate into concrete actions the use of emerging science-driven topics. Today, we are focusing on human augmentation, and I'm joined by 2 African brothers, a leading geneticist and a human rights activist, and I will introduce them just now. But let me tell you about the challenge that we have. Okay, the challenge that we have, you as a young person. Okay, let me explain my definition of young person. Last week, I went out of line. I said 40 and below. No. 30 and below. You've got to be 30 years and younger. You do not have to be registered at any university, whatever. 30 years and younger. We're giving you a challenge to look at these, engage in these sessions, and then ask yourself, how can this science of the future, how can you use this science of the future to shape your present? Okay, that's a challenge. And soon we'll give you the link where you can go and look at the question properly, look at the specification, what you need to submit, and then submit. And there'll be a judging panel. And here's what you can win: an all expenses paid trip to Geneva, where you'll attend the GESDA summit in October, and maybe even have an opportunity to share your ideas there. So let's get on. We're going to start with the video that focuses on human augmentation. There we go for the video. Enjoy, and I'll be back with you to introduce us, our conversationalists today. Thank you very much. I hope you were watching the video. Welcome back. As I said to you, I have two leading scholars who are going to have a conversation with me today on human augmentation, a very, very important conversation that we're having today. You know, I put it on my social media pages. I put it on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and immediately there was a lot of response. Some people saying, how can that ever be ethical? How can genetic engineering ever be ethical? And some people say, well, but I thought human beings are perfect as they are, created by God in God's image. Why would you want to change them in any way? Well, we're going to talk to Professor Ambrose Wonkam, who's a professor of genetic medicine. And of course, Ambrose is a scientist. Scientists do this work not for bad, but for good of humanity. And he will talk to us more about the science of this work. Ambrose is director of the McKusick-Nathans Institute and Department of Genetic Medicine. After an MD training at the Faculty of Medicine and Biomedical Sciences, University of Yaoundé in Cameroon, he completed a thesis in medical sciences at the University of Geneva in Switzerland, and a PhD in human genetics, University of Cape Town. And he also worked here at UCT. He remains a professor here at UCT, whilst also at Johns Hopkins. Professor Wonkam, his research interest is reflected in the almost 200 publications that he has put out, and they are all centered around harnessing African genomic variations to improve health and equity globally. Professor Wonkam is president of the African Society for Human Genetics and faculty scholar of the Human Genome Organization. Ambrose, thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate you making the time with us. And I hope people can see you on the screen. Fantastic to have you with us. I want you to introduce your views on how human augmentation will change our future. But before you do that, Ambrose, tell us what is human augmentation? What is human augmentation for people who don't know? And how will it change our future?
So thank you very much, VC. Thank you, Hetty. I'm really, really pleased to be here. I'm grateful for your invitation and the possibility to share an African perspective on it. So when we speak to human augmentation, we should not be scared because we are actually already augmenting some of our capacity. I think most of us use glasses for short sighting and for long sighting. That is already human augmentation. Some people that are missing a leg because of an accident or a war sometimes have prosthesis. It's been said that sometimes it works even much better than a natural arm. That is already human augmentation. But I will focus on human augmentation that uses a genetic technology that may involve, for example, giving instruction to some of our genes to produce protein that ultimately will lead to specific function. And that can happen through either gene therapy. That means we replace a defective gene. Many people within the continent are very familiar with sickle cell disease. There are gene therapy of sickle cell disease, which is a blood disorder that is already effective in clinic. The second is gene editing. We don't replace a gene, but we change a single letter of the genetic alphabet to produce a protein that is desired. Actually, most of us have already experienced through the vaccination of COVID-19 something that is a prelude to what would be perhaps human augmentation tomorrow. So we use this time a simple instruction, which is RNA, to ask our body to produce a specific protein to create an immune reaction. That one of the techniques that was used for the development of one of the COVID-19 vaccine. So there are definitely a lot of potential for human augmentation for therapeutic purposes. But I can foresee the fear of people of using it for more recreational purpose, for example, increasing intelligence or increasing memory. And I agree that those ones, perhaps we are not yet genetically literate enough to do it safely, and perhaps we do not yet have all the required ethical and legal environment to do it properly.
Okay, thank you very much for that explanation on what human augmentation is, because people only see the potential bad use of it. And what you are telling us is, well, we are already using it, so there's no need to be scared. Of course, scientists think about those good things. And at some stage today, I want us to talk about the ethics of this. Could things go wrong?
Yes.
You know, and we'll get to that. But first, let me introduce Dr. Leo Igwe. Leo, thank you so much for joining me on this platform. Really appreciate you making the time. Leo is a scholar of religion and also described as an activist because of his fascination with practical relevance and application of knowledge. Leo, of course, is a postdoctoral research fellow here at UCT in the Department of the Study of Religions. He holds a BPhil and an MA in philosophy from the Seat of Wisdom Seminary, Owerri, and University of Calabar in Nigeria, and a doctoral degree in religious studies from the University of Bayreuth in Germany. Last year, Leo authored a very interesting paper titled Transhumanism and Emerging Technologies, Exploring Ethics and Human Enhancement in Africa. And Leo, that paper, of course, is fascinating. I'm sure many people will want to read it. But can you introduce your views on how human augmentation will change our future? Perhaps your views about it, just in general, human augmentation, and then how you think it will shape our future from your perspective.
Yes, thank you so much for the invitation and the opportunity to share this platform with you. I wrote that paper trying to explore the ethical implication of a human augmentation, because too often when I go for conferences, there's always this tendency that people explain, oh, we have emerging technologies. And I ask them, I don't see that in Nigeria. I don't see it. Who are they we? And how does this relate to us? So, and I'm always concerned about the fact that these technologies may not have equitable impacts. You know, the impact they have in other societies might not be the same. For instance, these technologies might actually be for the rich. Yes. Who are those who are going to access these technologies? And what will be the impact of these technologies on those who are not able to access them? Yes. Human augmentation refers to the idea of course, boosting, extending, and putting in place technologies that can enhance human beings bodily, mentally, cognitively. But the question there, the major question is, who determines the extent of enhancement? What is the limit? And again, are people going to have, globally, are we going to have equal access to enhancement? Will everybody get enhanced if they want? If you refuse to be enhanced, like now, there are people from ideological reasons might not want. They think that human augmentation is like tampering on, in quote, God's creation. Now, how will that relate to the people who, from ideological reasons, may not want to be enhanced? So, at the end of the day, the Human Enhancement Project is just something out there. But when it comes to our region, there are challenges in terms of access, in terms of limits, in terms of some ideological pushbacks, you know, some of the project might experience, you know, in the course of its execution.
Thank you, Leo. Leo, but what do you say then to Ambrose's input that, well, human augmentation is already there and people are already having access to it. This is advancing. you know, and maybe to people who say, well, and it has potential, you know, it has potential for other therapeutics that can help us with diseases such as cancer or neurodegenerative diseases and so on. So should we worry as scientists about this advancement, or should we focus on its potential to actually what it can deliver with these diseases? What is it that?
Yeah, what happens is that ethical consideration integrates that worry. That's why we're talking about its ethical use. So yes. Ethical use implies that this could be misused. These technologies could be misused. So, and that is why it is important to begin to analyze who makes it available, who has access to it, what could be the implication if, for instance, in my article, I try to take note of the fact that, of course, the existing technologies has created a situation whereby we have less developed and developed countries, or underdeveloped and developed countries. And there is a worry, there's a concern that these technologies could also, let's use the human augmentation, could create a situation where we have less augmented as opposed to augmented humans, or under-augmented as opposed to augmented humans. So there's a tendency that the gaps, the technology gap we have now, you know, could be replicated. But the question is, in solving human problems, are we to be driven by fears, or are we driven by hopes or positive outlook or the optimism and all that? Of course, if we are to be driven by fears, one could always keep focusing on the harm, the destruction, the inequities. But I think for me, it is important that we understand that every technology will always have, you know, a kind of the harmful and the beneficial aspects. But there is a lot of potentials in, you know, exploring human augmentations, because at the end of the day, it's going to help us address some of the early problems that has actually, you know, hampered the development and the progress of our region. Yes.
Thank you very much, Leo. Let me invite the people who are joining us on Twitter, on the UCT Twitter page, as well as on the UCT Facebook page. Put your questions in the comments section and we will ask them as we go along. But I want to go to Professor Wonkam. Ambrose, you know, these advances in cognitive neurosciences and brain-machine interfaces and neural technologies are very powerful and they have a good use, but there's this thing that they may also provide access to our inner thoughts in the near future, and therefore allow others to steer our behavior. Is that possible? Can their power even get there? Should I be concerned?
Yeah, let's say everything is possible, but everything is also controllable. I think when humans discover fire, they realize that fire will help them cook, help them bring light during night, help them protect themselves against animals. But fire also help them burn the village of the neighbor. So every new technology development will bring some risk and also some danger that need to be controlled. Maybe I will respond to Leo with regard to the equity problem when it comes to the big divide that augmentation can bring. But I will rather focus on the potential of Africa in terms of genetic specifically and what can be related to the augmentation. I think the human, those that are listening to us today from Africa and out of Africa should remember that we are all Africans. The first human being evolved in Africa. And humans stay in Africa at least 300,000 years before colonizing Europe and America and Asia. During those 300,000 years, there have been a lot of changes within our genetic material that are not yet well captured, for example, in the big library that we call the human genome. So in other words, they are still key to understand how our genome works properly within Africans like you and I on this platform that have not yet been explored. I do think there is a massive opportunity for African science and for African scientists to capture that for everything that will be implementation in future. For example, I spoke to the use of genetic technology to develop for the vaccine for COVID-19. We should also remember that one of the variants that actually is dominant in the world was described by South African scientists. So we are not that far in terms of our capacity of harnessing that technology, but we need to know which potential do we have. I do think we have the competitive advantage of having the oldest genome of humankind. And having the oldest genome in an environment that is extremely variable from Cairo to Cape Town, that offer a huge opportunity to understand the interaction between the variant that God created and our direct environment. So we should be looking the future of human augmentation positively as African, because we already have that competitive advantage. And our capacity of handling genome, as we probably show it during the COVID-19 pandemic, is not that bad. Actually, it is good. And to look for what are the implications, for example, for the new science that young Africans can do. What also the implication for the new economy, bioeconomy, that can evolve from that.
I mean, it's fascinating how you started by showing the danger of the good things that we have and how dangerous they can be, and this would be the same in the future. And then also the potential of the African continent. Leo, do you want to respond to some of the things that Ambrose said?
We should not rule out the fact that there are dangers and risks that he noted. And that in trying to present a very positive outlook, we have to acknowledge these dangers. And again, there's a politics to it. Yes, I also mentioned it in my essay about who deploys these technologies. Let us not forget that today countries could be at war in other countries, and some of these technologies could be a weapon of war, a weapon to decimate, other populations and all that. So what I'm saying, why I am optimistic, why I'm positive, because take a look at the mortality rate, the diseases in the region, and what he mentioned about the COVID-19 and all that. Why there are prospects that human augmentation could provide us with a response, unprecedented in human history in terms of having control over these diseases. But we should also know that it could also lead to a lot of risk and harm, and that politics in the world today is not always positive. There are destructive politics going on there, and that tyrants could go to any extent to harm their enemies and all that, and opponents and all that, and weaponize this technology. So what I'm saying is this: while we should, of course, be very positive about the prospects of human augmentation, we should also not rule out the fact that it could be weaponized, to achieve the opposite effect.
Yes, Leo. So Leo, how should we prepare now, though, to ensure that these technologies can be used correctly or can be used to benefit all people and mitigate these undesirable users that you're talking about? Is there anything that we can do now to prepare for that? Because as it is, it seems to me that it may not be a wise idea or we might not even win if you say, stop this development. It's not going to stop, right? So how can we prepare, particularly as the African continent, how can we prepare ourselves for these changes, just to mitigate their undesirable users?
Well, first of all, I say we should go ahead. I'm not saying that we should stop. So the issue of stopping for me is not even, that is not an issue for debate. It's not something we're going to, so we're going to go ahead. And even if we refuse to go ahead, other parts of the world will go ahead and leave us behind. So there is no, stopping is not, is not something we should even be talking about. We should rather be saying, like you noted, as Africans, as a region, how are we really going to get involved in a way that is responsive, in a way that puts puts our own interest on the table. Because my concern is that Africa is passive when it comes to these research and development. We are on the receiving side. And just like the vaccines, they developed the vaccines and now decided which number Nigeria we get. Oh, Nigeria we get 30 million vaccine, Ghana we get this and all that. So we need to get into the business. First of all, the labs, where the technology, the human augmentation technology, the labs, we should have some of them located in South Africa, located in Egypt, located in Nigeria and all that. So because when these labs, when they research are controlled and are done overwhelmingly by other countries, they also control the benefits and they control those who get it. So Africa should also be involved so that when they are discussing who gets this technology, how do we research it, we should be at the table in terms of the research, in terms of determining the research, not only at the table when they're talking about benefits and sharing the vaccines and all that. We should be there participating in the research of the vaccines. We should be there participating in all sorts of brain enhancement projects and all that, so that we can also effectively control the benefits, and we can also make this research to reflect our own priorities. So because at this time around, we are more or less on the fringe, we are more or less on the edge, we're on the margins in terms of biopolitics and technopolitics. So and much of what we are doing is being controlled from outside. We need to begin to control and drive those research based on African needs, African realities, and African experience.
Thanks, Leo. Ambrose, are we really on the margins? You are out there.
Yeah, I think I'll probably, while I support some of the point that Leo mentioned, I will be more optimistic. I think the first thing is that there are in Africa at the moment, in terms of science and technology institutions that have shown themselves to be extremely advanced and actually leading. And the UCT is not far away from that. And the UCT actually is very, very close to that. We should always remember that there's at least 3 major advances that came from UCT that have helped the world. The first is the development of the CT scan, actually, that led to the Nobel Prize. Of course, the heart transplant was a second very important advancement that happened to UCT, from UCT. I think a couple of weeks back, we reported in one of the Nature journal discovery of 7 novel gene of hearing impairment in Ghana, and all those research was not performed here at Hopkins, was performed at UCT. So I think they are the Institute of Infectious Disease and Molecular Medicine that is under the leadership of Haiti actually is leading some of the major advances that vaccine development happen. And there is Regima Institute in Nigeria, for example, is the place where most research on Ebola, for example, Lassa fever, allowed to control the epidemic in West Africa using molecular technology, from diagnostic also to treatment. So they are important centers on the continent that are doing some great work. So I do think in terms of the of priority, I think we have four level of investment that we should quickly done. The first is academic investment. I do think UCT is showing the way, I think, on the African continent, and leading actually on the African continent, investing in genetic technology by promoting scientists and promoting a young investigator from graduate student, doctorate degree student, and postdoc student. The second level is hospital. We need to prepare our hospital to be able to handle those technology by training counselor and genetic doctors that are able to handle the technology. The third level of investment, of course, is at the level of technology itself. We need to have sequencing centers that are able, for example, in a similar way, Dr. De Oliveira described Omicron in KwaZulu-Natal, that are able to handle some of the priority that are important for the world. Of course, the last is the ethical, legal, and social implication that allow those technology. And again, you see the South Africa lead to some extent. How are we going to allow the transfer? How are we going to allow the accessibility? How are we going to allow the equity? All those questions, philosophical and ethical, we need to have a specific African advantage. Maybe one point that I will add, the last point, is probably the private and public partnership. I think one of those technology, the most efficient way is to get it developed through a private venture. Unfortunately, that's something I learned much later in my science life, because I realized that actually the to get the technology to people is seldom through government institution. Usually it goes through private, and the only way you can have some stake into those is to foster and facilitate public and private partnership that allow technology to be equitable.
Thanks, Ambrose. I mean, it seems to me, as you were responding to Leo, I thought, you know, it seems to me that there's always a gap between science and society, or what scientists do and what society gets to understand. And given these enormous changes that are really almost here with us already, how can we bridge this, Ambrose? Just I mean, this session that we are having today is an attempt. Okay, it's an attempt. But I can see that this session, as much of an attempt it is. I mean, I ran a lot of sessions during the lockdown, and they had 1 million views, and I had hundreds of people online watching every Sunday, because I'm talking about how they can structure their research project and so on. But it's not the same for this, okay? Because people think, it's above me, it's against my Christian beliefs, and I've been battling with this throughout the week, thinking, how do I do this for people to listen? It seems to me we need these more conversations so that people get to know what's been done on the African continent. Because there's always a perception that these things are done by the West, and they are done on Africans for Africans. And so we need to get more Africans on board. And also to understand that it's not new. It's not like human augmentation, voila, it's a new thing. Suddenly we are augmenting humans and human capacity. We've always done that. Is there a way that human augmentation could lead, though? I mean, let me ask this question, could lead to the equalization of all in the world? I mean, is there a possibility? And as you respond to that, Ambrose, I'm going to ask whether you have any ideas, perhaps, in terms of how can we get more people, just ordinary people in our society, to engage in this, to be interested, to be excited about this, and to know what's going on the African continent.
Yeah, Hetty, I think this conversation is already an excellent step, and I really commend the initiative, because having a conversation from the academics, not only scientists, but academic leaders and the society, is the first step to actually even foresee some of the challenges we have not anticipated. So the conversation with the public is important and their perspective. And once again, I do think institutions in Africa have well organized. I know, for example, that the Office of Caroline Newton, who is on this call, when I was when I was still doing at the UCT, every single time we have an important piece of research, I will reach to that office to make sure that we put it out there. And by putting it in a more general, palatable form for the general public, first of all, it's a way of reporting back, because all researchers do their research on public funding. They need to inform the public what they found. So this needs to be a systematic ways of connecting with the public and connecting with the society and connecting with with people that actually support our work. So public engagement and community engagement needs to be let's say a must for each research and science enterprise. I know some of the scientists, for example, those in hard science, like mathematician like yourself, or physics, will say we don't know how to communicate that with people, I don't know, living in Kalisha or living in. It's not true, because every single person can understand if it is simplified enough, and actually even improve the hypothesis of the type of science that we are doing. And I remember some of the research that we are doing now on survival in one specific condition called sickle cell disease. That idea was provided to me by one patient. It was not my idea. It was by communicating with patients that area they told us that actually what we are worried most now is about our quality of life. And I say, actually, why? And then he said, why is that some of us live very long and some die very early? And that became a research question for us. And we are now been doing that research question for more than 10 years now, and with very strong funding from major agencies. And that idea, there is no way I would have had it if I did not have the conversation to ask to the people that we are researching on what is actually their problem. I do think for human augmentation, including in genetics, we probably need to have this conversation more commonly with general public, have their perspective, listen to their fears actually, and listen to their expectation, listen to their hope. What is actually the priority in terms of augmentation that we will be investing in? Is it infectious disease? Is it vaccine? Is it memory? Is it even the fear of death by increasing our life expectancy? And maybe there are not people out there that don't want to live forever. Maybe most people want to live forever, but we don't know. We need to ask.
Yeah. Thanks, Ambrose. Leo, how should governments, academia, and the business sector work together to help us prepare for this future that's almost here with us?
I think there has to be the partnership. I think Professor has also noted that in his own response, in terms of it's not going to be a one-party preoccupation of business and all that. You have the public-private partnership, you have the government and the society at large. So what I think that there has to be a kind of a partnership, and that partnership must be governed or must be driven by the priority and by this vision as embedded in this initiative, in terms of a government should be preoccupied with how do we mainstream, this futuristic thinking in terms of our policies today. Because very often, governments are concerned by election. They want, like in Nigeria, they're looking for what will make them win election. They are not concerned about the future as we are talking about here. Now, academic people might be more long-term in terms of their own vision and programs, but governments sometimes are short-termistic. They want to know what will keep them in power and all that, and not exactly what will be ultimately, for the benefit of the society. So that's why there's a need for that kind of partnership. The academic will also bring their, of course, long-term projects and draw the attention of the government, and also bring in other agencies, the private organizations who might have to find a way to forge, a kind of a policy and programs that will, in a piecemeal form, begin to break down this into steps. Like now, I wanted to respond, to the professor's comment about the research and the research products. You see, I draw my own experience. I draw my experiences from Nigeria. You see, there is concern when it comes to research is different from people's attitude when the research comes out and maybe we have a product, we have a vaccine, we have like sickle cell disease, and there are research today that people are going through all this kind of transplant or cell a process that will enable them not to die. People who are sickle cell and all that, they go to hospitals and all that. Do you know that people go for this? A lot of people spend money. They go to Qatar, they go to United States and look for it. But the attitude to research, when you want to do the research, there will be ideological pushbacks, to some of those research, because they might think that, oh, you are tampering with life. So that's why I think it is important to find a way to find a way to bring together different interests. The government with their short-termistic interest of winning elections and retaining power and all that. Now, the academic people, with their long-term projects sometimes of understanding why people live long and understanding why people die young. Governments may not even want to get into such questions. That's an academic question. Then again, research will have products. In terms of when they deliver these vaccines, when they deliver these surgeries, when they come up with these cutting-edge biotechnologies that will be of a benefit to society. So the thing is that it requires us coming together with this, this interest, with the hope of course, finding solution to problems that continue to confront us as a society and as human beings.
Yeah, and Leo, what role can the African youth play, and how should they be involved? I mean, I agree with you that politicians their ideas are short term because they've got a limited term in office and they focus on that. But we've got young people who are going to be here after we're gone. How do we get involved now? What's the best way of doing this? Any ideas?
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank UCT for this initiative. And maybe I don't know about what other universities are doing, but this is quite fantastic, because there seems to be a disconnection between the society and the young people. We have that even in my country, Nigeria, and all that. So the young people feel that their interests are not mainstreamed. Nobody talks about them, and all that. So the future comes to them by sudden, and they have to lead unprepared. So first of all is that it is important to get young people involved, and for us to stop being very arrogant and short-sighted, and let us say clear, we are going to give the way. We are leaving the way. These young people own the future. The future we are talking about, we will not be there. Let's tell ourselves the truth. And let's if we are talking about this futuristic scheme, let us know that it is not our futuristic scheme. In other words, when we are having a program like this, young people should be there. They should be integrated. They should be involved in some of these labs. We should have people, young people at a particular segment where they either watch or observe. Because if you are going to take the baton from somebody, you have to also observe as a person is running, like in a relay race and all that. So we should bring them in, we should bring them on board, and we should let them understand that this future we are talking about is not our future, is their future. And the duty is actually on us who are the leaders in academia, in the government, on us like scientists who are doing that. They should know that some of the cures we are trying to find, we might not be alive to see that. So it is important we integrate them. It is all about integration. It's all about youth participation. It's all about youth ownership of these programs we are talking about.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Leo. Ambrose, you play a lot of leading roles in the world, and I want you to speak from the roles that you occupy as president of the African Society for Human Genetics, as chair of the steering committee for H3 Africa Consortium, and board member of the International Federation of Human Genetics. What is the view of the scientific and policy communities on the potential benefits, risks, and ethical issues on human augmentation? I mean, what's the view that's coming out of there? I mean, it would be interesting to know, because those are global bodies. They are not just looking locally. Can you share with us some of that?
Yes, I think probably I would want to jump on the role of the youth. I think the youth, before I can answer directly your question, I think the youth is critical. We know how the youth was push revolution. For example, the Youth Day in South Africa is the celebration of a few young people that revolt against using a specific language for their education. And that had led and lead to change. We know that if a road is not in front of your office up there, is because the youth a couple of years say, we don't want to see this statue here again. So I do think the youth, by their provocation and protest, help. I also think that the youth, by the way they handle communication with modern media, help. I think they should allow us to help us what is the language that works best for people out there to have opinion and to get it in such a way that people can engage, for example, for the issue of gene editing. So to come back to the specific question, how can Africa engage in future? I think last year we published in Nature a vision where we thought initially was just a vision, where we thought that if the future of genetics have to meet the scientific and the equity imperative, we need to sequence at least 3 million people that live in Africa to understand our common genome. Because for the past 20 years, the genome have been looked only from the purely European perspective. I think one of our sisters in Nigeria, Chimamanda Adichie, says the danger of the single story is not that the single story is untruth, it's not complete. For the past 20 years, we as a genetics community, we have forgot actually where our genome evolved from Africa. And if we do not understand it properly, we are not going to understand anything, including some of the target of gene augmentation that we want in future. So when we proposed that vision, it was based on the fact that we are all African. The first was ancestry. The second was ecology, as we say, the variability of the environment in Africa that actually shape our genome over the past 300,000 years. The third was equity, because some of the benefit of the human genome have not yet translated into practice in Africa. And for some reason, that project became have become extremely popular, not just in Africa, but globally. I think we spoke to the WHO Science Council about the project. We spoke to an organization called HIROS, that is a collection of the 25 most funding body in the world, and the NIH Wellcome Trust. Actually, they fund 80% of research in the world. They were very interested. We spoke to the people from the African Union, and I must say, and nearly all the capital of industry in the world at a very high level. And each of those meetings, I never really asked for them. I think the paper received a lot of success, and most of those bodies invite us to meet. What I'm trying to say, Hetty, is that next year it is possible that there will be a major project that probably will happen to be announced in Cape Town to try to crack that. And cracking that means billions of investment. We propose that that project should cost minimum $4.5 billion. That means that a billion of investment that will follow to try to crack down a better understanding of our African genome. And better understand African genome is not charity business. It's to better understand our whole humanity genome. And by doing so, cracking down target for new therapeutics. We know, for example, that we have 20,000 genes in our body, but only 25%, about 30% of them are associated to disease. The other 70% we don't yet know. That means that every single thing still needs to be known, and I think Africa will play a very important role. It is possible that part of that will be announced at the International Federation of Human Genetic meeting that will happen in Cape Town in February next year. So Africa is very much at the center of the next 20 years agenda of human genome, and probably target for human in augmentation.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing that. And Leo, you have reflected extensively on how emerging technologies hold the promise of eradicating diseases, poverty, and mortality rates. But the African technological differential from the rest of the world poses a crucial challenge to these optimistic views. I want you to give us your closing remarks about what the ethical, political, and technological questions from an African perspective could be to the prospects and possibilities of using and applying human augmentation technologies in Africa.
The fact there is that the promise of technologies has always been with us, human beings, right from the time with the stones, with the Stone Age, Iron Age, and here we are today. And those technologies have always come with their promises, have always come with their goods, we also with their harm, the dangers, and risks associated with them. So as it was in the Stone Age, so will it be right now when it comes to human augmentation technologies. But there is one concern I've always heard. Why is Africa not always on the same par with the rest of the world? Why is it? Look at it. Take a look at the region, and you see that Africa has always been more or less, I call, on the dumping ground. This is my experience in Nigeria. I don't know about South Africa and all that. So there has been this idea that we get a kind of a handout of these technologies. Even though some of the research, like Professor has noted here now, that some of the research has taken place here. But the benefits, the goods, we seem to not to have an optimal benefit from the goods and the products of this. So there are gaps here and there. And that is why today they say Africa is underdeveloped. They say Africa, the mortality rate, is very high and all that. So now it is important that we begin to understand why the existing gap, despite the fact that some of these technologies have been there, and that if we don't address the existing gap in terms of existing technology, we will not actually be able to overcome the gaps that will come with emerging technology or the human augmentation technology. So that's really, for me, instructive. It's something we have to be aware of. And that it is important in doing this that we bring the young people on board. Yes, because it is the young people that will lead these efforts tomorrow. It's very emphatic because already where we are today, the gaps are there. So it is important that we understand that, okay, these also technologies are political. Yes, that governments can make decisions as to who produces what and who gets what. So there is a political angle to these technologies. Yes, we can have all this research going on, but the outcome of that research, the governments can decide who gets it, how is it distributed and all that. And that Africa need to wake up. Yes, we need to wake up, we need to stand up, we need to understand that already the situation doesn't favor us. And it is partly because of how we relate to the project. So it is important that we put all these challenges, political, ethical, on the table and begin to mainstream African interest, African priorities, African situations, so that the promises of human augmentation technology, the curing death, and also banishing mortality, and becomes not what we'll be reading on papers, not what we need to understand when we travel to Europe, but what is part and parcel of our university education, part and parcel of everyday life, part and parcel of everyday politics. It is not going to be elitist. What we are hearing now is elitist. It is all for educated up there. So we want to step it down. And that is why we also have to carry our youth along and make sure that this future we are talking about, they understand it and they are going to lead and make sure that that future is delivered.
Thank you very much, Leo. Ambrose, your closing remarks.
So I was grateful for this fantastic session. I think I'm very optimistic. I do think the future of human augmentation using genetic technology will have to do with Africa, cannot do without Africa. I'm hopeful that the youth will take new opportunity that will go with it, not just for human, but also for any other type of biosciences in terms of One Health, our ecology, animals research, and also plant research around it. I do think we have that potential within the continent. We just need to, I think, the VCC unleash it, and I think we have the capacity of unleashing that potential based on the institution that we have, like UCT, but also based on connection within the continent. But we cannot do it without the international collaboration with those that are willing to see it happen. I think there is a very important concept that I think we need to build on, which is the leapfrog concept. Everybody in Africa now use the cell phone, and no one actually use the landline. So we don't need necessarily to pass by or to go through all the stages that are allowed to reach technology today. But we can leapfrog on what is already available now and use the international connection that we have in Africa and out of Africa, Pan-African connection, to allow Africa to be ready to be engaged and take the benefit of the next let's say, development that will be associated with the human augmentation, of course, with all the ethical constraints that need to be respected.
Yep. Thank you very much, Ambrose. And thank you very much, Leo. Thank you to the both of you for engaging with us on this very important question. I mean, it feels to me that we need another 2 sessions to talk about this. I mean, it's so important, but it scares people. People feel like we are trying to play God. But actually, these developments are here and they are here for us. They just have to be dealt with and implemented ethically and equitably to make sure that they serve us and they're not used against us. And so my hope, of course, Ambrose, is that next year during the International Congress of Human Genetics in February, perhaps we find an opportunity of putting the spotlight on the work that geneticists, particularly on this continent, are doing and the contributions that we are making to this area of study. I think we must find a way of doing that, because otherwise we perpetuate the stereotype that we are not having a contribution. And then we can also get young voices in. So we'll think about an idea, because we'll be having a lot of people here who are experts who can engage. So we'll contact you in that regard. But I really really think it's an important conversation to have at that level of society and young people to be involved. And Leo, thank you so much for interacting with this work, in your work, and the papers that you're writing to draw attention to some of the challenges and to show us the blind spots, potential blind spots that society should look at. So that's very useful. To everyone who's been watching, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. I really apologize for the sound today, and I know that many people wanted to join us on Teams. They haven't been able to, but this session will be recorded. It will be on the UCT YouTube channel, and you can watch it there. Remember that there's a competition that we are busy with. And if you come to my Facebook page and Twitter page tomorrow, we will announce and send you the link where you can register to receive all the information about the competition, and also register your interest, because we would like young people 30 and below to interact, to engage, to participate, and get the opportunity to actually go to Geneva and engage with other academics, politicians, policymakers, and business people on these issues that are very important to us. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you to Ambrose and Leo, as well as the team, the UCT team, that made it possible for us to be here with you today. Have a good evening.